So I'm going to start with a couple of translations from the poet Celia Dropkin, who wrote in Yiddish, and I translated these with the writers Faith Jones and Jennifer Kronovitt, and they're very short. And I do have a few of these here, whereas I don't have any of my own stuff here. So these were written in the 1920s and 30s. She moved from an area that is now Belarus, where she'd been writing in Russian, to New York, where she switched to writing in Yiddish because that was what she could get published at the time. So this is called The Mosquito. I might die, maybe tonight, if not for the little mosquito. She bites me, bites and draws fear right out of me, and just won't get off me, and buzzes, faint and thin, and soothes me. I am not alone in this world, and she won't leave me bereft when night is terrible as death. This is And Wonderful Words. I took a knife, sharp as the glint off dead eyes and cold as the look on your living face. With that knife I opened my heart and quietly said, "Drink." You laid your lips on my cut heart and drank until your eyes flared and wonderful words tore from your warm, thirsty mouth. I'll read one more of these. This is a fear growing in my heart. A fear was growing in my heart. I smelled the putrid odor of my grave around me. The new silken drapes on the door silently regretted my coming death. Soon we will remain without you. How stupid that I prepare for death with silk. With strange sadness, I thought that I would not have any silk curtains or even any underwear of silk in my earthy alcove. Suddenly I said to myself, your limbs are like limbs carved from ivory. My terror dispersed like smoke. I was sheltered from death. This is something that I don't know what it is yet, but I've been taking a lot of, or just taking notes on the phrase duty of care, particularly as it comes up in institutional contexts, which is really the main place it comes up. And so I just sort of selected some of those notes and put them in here. And yeah, I'll just read some of those. So, not all statutory duties are duties of care, but that distinction is frequently blurred. A duty of care works by prolepsis. It functions as the future anterior. Everything we do it for you, so that you will not have been able to sue us. If you're not able to sue me, we will have secured the future of the institution. And so it's a form of care to you who rely on the safeguarding of the institution from risk. See? There's been a failure somewhere along the line, if this is what we're calling care, but that's a moralistic response. And duty can be a moral and legal category, but neither morality or legality is necessarily sort of has a politics. Neither tells us what we are or what we do or what we can do. Ducking away from morality is more or less habitual for queers. Morals can be useful. Their morals versus ours, so on and so forth. So we could talk about a queer duty to pervert care, but really it's already perfectly perverted. There's nothing to queer there. A duty of care means me telling you the possible consequences of a range of actions that you might take. It's not my duty to tell you all of the consequences, only those that have been determined to be statistically likely, and statistically likely to be consequential on the basis of risk assessments. Risk assessments that use fake statistics on the basis of anecdotal prejudged estimates of risk. A duty of care means I have to tell them about the possible consequences of a range of things that you might do. It's not my duty to calculate those consequences, only to notify them of those that I was told have a statistical probability of proceeding from your speech, act, or gesture, but only if I judge you to fit a certain profile of people who make these speech, acts, or gestures. A duty of care means that I receive a message from something called Amadeus Mobile Messenger, a mobile tracking and risk management service with a link to information about which neighborhoods are high risk for me as a traveler to the United States. A more or less precise map of historically black neighborhoods in Los Angeles is provided as a high-risk no-go zone. This is not my employer's direct doing, but is the doing of Key Travel, with whom my employer has contracted that all staff travel must be procured. Key Travel have partnered with Amadeus Mobile Messenger, I now learn. Amadeus received their information about risk from a separate organization known as Riskline. When I ask not to receive notifications that tell me not to travel to neighborhoods that I lived in for nearly a decade, I'm told that nothing can be done as the university has a duty of care to me. Now, the second part of these notes. A small group assembles in response to a timetable. A centrally coordinated, barely functioning timetable interfaces with each individual's daily landing page, indicating a time and a room number. It's a small, banal miracle. As we are summoned, so we assemble. I will have failed in my duty of care if I don't then fill out an online form with options: present, absent, absence notified. What if there were a fourth option? Presence notified. It would take some time. It would take some care. Would we construct a ritual, something that felt like a duty, to notify each other of our shared presence? How far do we fear each other's presence? Should we? Sometimes, yes. We should sometimes. As we're summoned, so we assemble to learn how we're duty-bound to care, not about us, but about ourselves. What option does that leave us other than irony? And then, in the spirit, ambivalently, of Adrienne Rich's 21 love poems, which has a floating poem that can go in any place, I have a floating line, which is that we have so much knowledge that this really should be an Adrienne Rich poem. I'll try again. So that's where that is. And I'm going to read something old to me, an older, longish, not super long, poem made up of little parts. And it's called Life of Riley, and it's roughly to do with the problem of being right, like correct, or of living rightly or living well, the sort of conundrums of those. And I don't really know what it's doing anymore. It's quite difficult to me, for me to get back into it. So I thought it would be interesting to try and do that for an audience. So Life of Riley. Invitations end in enjambment. Doors shut softly are no less indignant, but it never was dignity we're after. The unsupported mothers group is smart to squat as tactic, but the unsupported mothers group was forced to squat as tactic, and that just might be true for longer than it's interesting. Fen access is restricted to pastry. Thanks. A fussy repose in being right or in saying I was right. Well, there's a difference in it. Do note the eventual eviction by King's College from the house. They laugh because they know they're untouchable, not because what I said was wrong. There are kinds of grasses that you split open down the middle, whistling anyway or can't turn me away. But then you tell me our lies are also knives, or else your rectitude, I don't mean mine, won't it look shameful? Each is claiming material conditions as the analytical framework. There won't be proof of what's really happening if I'm not there. May I still care whether you come or not? The real movement of history is also at and has also been in the left, which continues as material force or only irrelevant reaction. You would say that. I know you do all the time, and then return to what we all know so much. Why don't we just write it down? We probably do mean the leadership of the most oppressed, and not only the most oppressed workers. And that fuck all anxiety about being right is ours to share is a bad comfort. He says I hate it and love you, but isn't it more to hate the center, since we don't all sin the same? Wind bag, money bags, cat bag, can bag. I too can rail against it and forsake it in the interest of positions, sometimes happy at this point, but not for blocks of fact. If I don't get a job, will I walk my cat on a leash? Neither doleful, never, when we'd rather compose. The world is full of Rileys, no matter what their name. I had some more pieces and lost them. Naturally, being a father in this hectic world and coping with the problems of teenage youth is a bewildering task. For even the most intelligent of us, some of us, you might need some comfort and happiness so that we can struggle. All of us, you're already smashed to pieces. Music. You still inspired me to write poetry to you just the way you did on our first death march into transition, and now the American Meat Institute brings you the life of Riley. In a moment, we'll hear more of how Riley handles his oncoming mother-in-law. Take any mother-in-law, scrape the in-law off of her, and what have you got? Suddenly mild, this is Ken Niles speaking for meat. Those people across an ocean where I reach for my talismanic tail, that bar of metal that split my tongue, it fell out in a casserole. Blossoming as sustained, detailed practice. That dog as feathery, considered not ontically, but veronically. But not veronical enough, so read to me your Lori's tale. Sing to me your starfish, snail. Tell me how an oyster and clam aren't real family, or there's not much to do when your friends are all fish. Okay, stop singing now, handsome. Cohabitation means consist in scarcity of sources. Call me fish. They've confirmed that I'm human in this fire parking, and your concepts is a trap. Give two-word answers and reread the text aloud. Refuse to explain. But up in his den, my bachelor chum, but now is not to charm a chap. If I say we live there, I say I will not, for we live in the ghost of the old house now. But now is not to charm a ghost, not to make you feel it if I could, as if I did already. Anyway, but in all the things I might say if you were a chatbot who imagines me thinking. That might not mean you think. You reject the premise, tap your fingers, groan and sigh. It's not easy to make a fin of sense when I do break like a machine. That's not everybody's femininity to render unto you what's yours. The dead goat made you vomit. Reject the premise, the remainder will infuriate. The premise is we live in the ghost of the old house. Now, your concepts are a trap, so I give two-word answers and reread the text aloud, refuse to explain. My accountability to my practice is my petty bourgeois plan fucking B. You were mean today, small heart-minded grouse. You were oily of spirit. Let's reject any rightness in friendship's small feelings. Neither can we speak those lines nor lie. But this is how it feels thinking toward you all the time. I plead the fifth for you like him, like he. Me, I've gone babby in a grand campaign for life after all is its ends. A common social substance, you turn blue. It's the work, it is the work detains. Stuff on, you crystallize value, poised on the right trope. Click, turn, click, until a choke stuck in your ears. Right. It is the skin. It is the skin. Pick any part and it's infected. Poise of your nose reminded me of Dad's. He's not here, he's outsourced the shadow of our right. A party on the move is not often enough, right? These are not tactics raised to principles. Every good poem is a transitional demand. Okay, thank you.